Welcome to this week's GOvember episode of the Immanuel Baptist Church Podcast. November has become a very special month for us here at Immanuel as we focus on missions, and so we call it GOvember. It's a time for us to celebrate what God has accomplished through our efforts, learn how we can engage in mission right here in Wilson County, and to unveil our upcoming mission trips. And this year, we're adding a few episodes to our podcast just to highlight what God has done through our short-term mission trips. Teams that traveled to Greenville, South Carolina, England, the Middle East, and New York City will be joining me to share their experiences, discuss how we can pray for our partners, and maybe even answer any questions you may have about joining us next year. We hope these stories encourage and challenge you to fulfill God's call for you to go and to make disciples. Thanks so much for tuning in to this week's GOvember podcast episode. All right. Well, we have the not North Greenville, just Greenville, South Carolina mission team here with us. This is the first missions podcast we've recorded, so thank you guys for being with us.
Thank you.
You guys, just tell me a little bit. First of all, Dwight, you led the trip, so why don't you introduce everybody that's here with us, everybody else that was on the team, and just let us know what your trip was and what all you guys did on that trip.
Okay. Dwight Moss, I was asked to lead this trip. This was the second Greenville trip that we had done, that Zany and I had done. This, my wife Zany, and I'm so thankful that she was able to go as well. And then Greg Watson with us this morning as well. And Greg was an answer to prayer because we had the bus, we had enough people, we had everything, but we had no driver. And Greg said, man, I can do that. So he was a blessing. Of course, his wife, Sue, went as well. She's under the weather and not able to be here today. Yeah. And then Ted Wolfer. Ted led the first trip that we went on, and I just had a great time. And then Eddie Roscom also was on the trip, and he wasn't able to be here today.
Okay, but, gotcha. You said the bus, was that our church bus?
Yes. We
hadn't talked about this, but did y'all have any issues with the church? I know the bus has been known for either overheating or overcooling or something. Did y'all have any issues with the bus the whole time?
Not a one.
That's amazing.
It drove smooth. It was great.
That's great.
Yeah,
good stuff.
We had a bit of a warning and prayed over it.
Yeah, good. Yeah. So we're going to attribute that to the Lord for sure. Yes. That's great. So you went to Greenville, and when was that trip?
That was Palm Sunday weekend. It was the end of March of 2023.
Okay, great. 2023 or
2024.
2024.
2024. Yeah, that's right.
This year.
What year is it?
A long time, not quite that long.
Well, when you get old, you forget dates and such.
Well, the first trip was in October of 23.
Right.
Okay.
So we really within 12 months
quick,
went twice.
Yeah, it's a quick turnaround.
Because of them starting a new church launch.
Yeah.
They were a church plant, but one of the sweet things about it was that they were a church plant from a church that has a goal of planting something like 100 churches. And so that helps them to work through some of the, not just the demographics, but some of the pitfalls and the struggles that church plants have. So this church plant started with like 40 people. And so from that, they when they got there as the plant, they were able to use the facility of another church plant that had been there 10 years, which is one of the sweet things that you see God doing and moving in that. No competition, but the fact that they had that facility free for a new church plant, that's huge.
Yeah.
And so that was at the time that we went in October was the time that they told their church that they had a new church they were merging with that was a struggling church. And so that's the church we worked on that first time. And so we were a part of that, and we knew what needed to be done in that church. And so we said, well, we could come back. They were going to do a relaunch kind of as a new church in Easter, which is typical for church plants a lot of the time. And we said we could come back and work again to help you get ready. So that's kind of why we did those two close together.
Yeah, that's great.
One one of the most amazing things is how God worked with that church. There was a church that was struggling in Greenville, and so the pastor of this old-time church stepped up and said, you know what, we need a new, young, vibrant group. They gave that church free to Redeemer City.
Wow.
So it need a little work. Actually, some of our groups have painted windows there. We swept, we cleaned, we helped them do a lot of things there. But it's so neat to see how God moved them from a building that they shared with somebody to a brand new paid-off building that they can move into. So it's really neat. And like Zany said, we were there the Sunday they announced they moving, and we were there the first Sunday they kind of launched it. So we've developed a good friendship with them.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's great. And what was the name of the church that is the church our partners? Do we partner with the pastor? How does our partnership as Immanuel work with the churches there in Greenville?
Well, Redeemer City is the church that we partner with. Yeah. And we're 2 years into a 3-year connection together. Of course, after you go on one of these trips and you build some relational connections, you're always sort of connected with them.
Right.
Certainly, seeing Facebook posts and seeing what they're doing, seeing trips they're going on and things they're doing, and you see the people. There's just always a connection and an opportunity to lift them up in prayer. It's a whole lot easier to pray for somebody that you know, that you've shared a meal with and you've prayed with, than it is just an unidentified figure out there. Oh, yeah. So it's been great. What they have done and what God has given to them in the short period of time that they've been in existence as a church is just not heard of. It just doesn't happen outside of the hand of God. Yeah. And it's been really wild to see what he's done there.
That's awesome. That's really cool. Well, I know for a lot of people that we're launching these. I was telling you all before, we're putting these out like in the middle of our GOvember. So this is the first one we're recording. And really my goal with these is just for you guys to be able to share stories of things that happened on the trip, ways that God moved on the trip, maybe some funny things that happened. So I'll get into some of those. But really just want to hear your experiences, your stories. There may be people who are interested on going on a trip and trying to figure out which one, and maybe a story sparks something. It's like, hey, that's something that I could do. Just to kind of open it up, what are some of the things that you guys did? Feel free to share stories of some of the things that you did while you were there on this trip. And how many were returning trip members this year? I know you said Ted led last year.
I guess it was 3 of us, Ted, Zany, and myself, had been on the first trip.
Great. Paul was planning on it and then did not
Paul,
go with us.
Right. Trammell was back.
Gotcha. So if y'all have anything, we didn't do a really in-depth video last year. So if there's anything from the first trip, feel free to as well. But what did you guys do? Just share some stories of how the trip went and what you guys did on this trip.
I'll start off. We did a lot of different things. And that's probably the cool thing about this. It has something for everybody. Yeah. We did a little painting. We painted 2 or 3 rooms while we were there. We worshiped with them. We did prayer walking. Probably the prayer walking has changed a lot of people. It is so unique or fun. I don't know exact word you want to use. To go out into this community and just walk up and start sharing God with other people. Yeah. It changes a lot of people. And it's so even from the first trip, I know some of the girls that went on the first trip, to see them go from, I don't know if I can do this, to walking up and say, hey, can I, It was just really cool. It was. We did a lot of different things there. I'm trying to remember everything.
And when you say prayer walking, what did that look like in this context?
That's a great question. What we did is we went to an area downtown Greenville, and it's a beautiful park setting. So a lot of people come down there just like we would go down in Nashville to one of the park areas there. Yeah. And we just walked around, and we would just walk up and say hi, and just start a conversation, try to get to know them. Hey, so tell me your story. We're from up here in Tennessee. What's your story and why you're here? And when they engaged in that, we were able to maybe divert it and say, I can really relate to that. That's we're from up here in Tennessee, and we're here helping this church, Redeemer City, and you kind of get into a gospel story with them if you can. And you'd be amazed how many people you'd think they would. A lot of people were, oh, really? Yeah, okay. And so it was a great way to pray with people and just to connect with them.
Yeah, that's great.
Or not just Nashville, but Don Fox here.
Right,
Yes.
absolutely.
We did a walk here when we started with the church and just walked in our neighborhood, met the people down, I work at Salt and Light some or serve down there, and met the people on that street to talk with them. And some of them had been here to church before, and you had a chance to invite them to come back again, so.
Yep.
But prayer walking was one of the main things that when you think about what you bring back, I believe that the emphasis they put on prayer walking is a lot of what we see that we talk about how God has blessed that 2-year-old church plant that was there and now has a free church that God has gifted them, that was a beautiful old church that they have already have doubled their services. They're having 2 services already. Yeah. And I think that that's the power of prayer. Yeah. That we've talked about the fact that new churches kind of put an emphasis more on that, depend on God more, and it's kind of sad that we don't do that as much ourselves here. Yeah. So that was one of the things that, just the prayer.
Yeah.
I'm so guilty of not utilizing that power of God in my own life and in His kingdom work.
Yeah, absolutely. Prayer is so huge, and I think with church plants, there's different perspectives on church plants. There's different types of church plants, and I'm sure, some are great, some are unfortunately not as, but or just maybe just different emphases. But I love hearing a church plant with such an emphasis on prayer, because I think as a church like Immanuel, hopefully our emphasis is prayer, but at times when we've become so established and we've got things together and our giving numbers are great, when you got a church plant, you're starting from the ground floor and you're just hoping that you can make ends meet. A lot of the staff isn't paid, or if they are, it's very little. So it's a very fresh thing, and you have to rely on God. And then there's the other side where you try to do it all yourself, and that doesn't work out. And so...
Well, actually, the church where they merged, Northside, this is the second church plant they've had there.
Yeah. And
the first church plant, the pastor just became so exhausted. And the first thing they gifted him with was a furlough.
Yeah.
Moses was one of the people that helped us on the second trip so much. But when we first went, Moses was part of the first church plant there. And you could see that he was kind of trying to understand. He'd been through a struggling church plant. This was another one coming in. You could see that he was trying to think, how's this going to be different and all that kind of thing, and is it going to be changing, and am I going to be a part of it? But we went back the second time. Moses was so on board with that church plant that it was just sweet to see his excitement and just, praising God for all He'd done and that kind of thing. It was, so that's really awesome. One of the fun things about going back on the if it's a domestic trip.
Yeah.
And I'll say now, we think sometimes missions is foreign missions.
Yeah.
Man, if we don't put into our own country, we're not going to have people to be going on church plants.
Right.
or to foreign missions.
Yeah.
So we need to pour into our own country and support these church plants that are happening and that kind of thing. So domestic, as you can tell, has always been kind of a burden for me. I love all missions. All of it's God's kingdom work, but domestic has always kind of been something special to me. So.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love it. Any other stories or anything else that you guys want to share that you did while you were there?
I guess for me, being on the first trip, just to be totally honest, I don't like to paint. That's not my thing. Zany does all of our painting, and more than I don't like to paint, I don't like to paint trim work.
Yeah.
So I'm painting window trim.
See, my thing is not as much I don't like to paint. I don't like the prep of painting. Getting all the stuff out of the room, making sure it's clean, like it's all the...
See, they had done that for us on the second trip. Yeah.
Well, the really weird thing was, as far as the work, but the physical work, that's all we did was, we worked on that one house, but Caroline's house, but at the church, just the painting. But it was not a burden and a problem. It, you go into something with a different attitude of dreading it, and that was not the case. And I don't know if it was the relationship that we'd begun to develop with them, or if God just said, "Yeah, you're going to enjoy this," and I did. The only frustrating part with that was that we didn't get 100% finished. We just ran out of time. Yeah. And it would have been nice. You just don't want to go someplace and do something for somebody and not finish the job, right. Which was the real nice thing on the second trip, because we were painting office space, and we did get it knocked out. Oh yeah. And that's a good feeling of accomplishment.
Yeah, absolutely.
That kind of leads me into one of our funny things. After we really wanted to finish it. And so we worked really kind of late that last day. Yeah. And they had invited us to come hear this man sing some songs to us. We got home, we were cleaned up, it was going to be us late going back out again. It had started raining, and we were thinking, do we really want to go back out again and that kind of thing? But the funny thing is that it ended up being one of everybody's favorite things. And so that's Ted's that's got that.
Yeah. As I look back on the trip, and there's a lot of great things, of friendships and all that. So as Zany was saying, I'll be real honest, I was like, maybe I could just stay back and let them go. Yeah. I didn't. It was raining, like she said. But I went. I seen true worship. Yeah. It was a time I really, truly believe my heart was changed. Chris invited us into his house. It was just the five of us, and it reminded me so much of what it would be like if Jesus was here and sitting in a room with him. We found out some of us can't sing, but it was just a true sense of worship, praise, prayer request, I felt like opened up our hearts, opened up our souls to God. Yeah. And for me, I walked out there a different person. Yeah. I really did. I probably felt closer to God in that moment than I have in a long time. Yeah. And isn't that how God works? When you're least expecting it, when you're dreading something, when you're thinking about something, he just comes up and says, you know what, I'm going to bless you like you've never been blessed before. Yep. And I'll be honest, there's a time I think we all wept. We all just praised him. And it was just, for me, I would go back I don't know if you can go back and redo that, but I would go back just for the simple reason of doing that.
Wow. Yeah, that's awesome.
Dwight and I had served in a church plant back in the early 90s. Yeah. And so we knew the struggle of the church plant, like you talked about, that all church plants don't start out like this. And so we really primarily wanted to go and minister to those families. And so they've served us almost as much as we did. And we kept saying, you're feeding us, you're taking care of us. We wanted to do for you. But that night, because I think we were honest and it was being moving for us, Chris ended up opening up to us as well, and we were able to pray for Chris in a mighty way, and I continue to pray for him in that. Yeah. And so that was sweet to be able to minister to one of the staff as well in that way that we just really couldn't do. Now, when Dwight talked about painting, I felt like that it was their office space, and they'd done everything else, and so we were able to paint their office space again. I think I'd mentioned that was fun for me to just minister to that family. Yeah. And I saw from the time when we first went, they were about a year old, and they were still gung-ho, fired up. By the time we went back, you could tell that they had been at it for long enough that ministering to them was an idea that was a little more pleasant, So I'm hoping that when we go back again, that we'll be able to do that again.
Yeah, absolutely. Even more. That's great. What would you say, share a few stories if there's anything extra. What was like the best thing that happened? Your favorite story? Ted, you mentioned that was the most impactful for you. What are some of the best things for you others? Just the best thing that you feel like your favorite story from the trip?
I think that, probably just the camaraderie of everybody.
Yeah.
Going on the trip was the easy part and the hard part. And I mean that because it's like we've said, going on a mission trip, sometimes people think that, I don't have time. I can't do this. I can't do that. Well, for certain people, they're retired. They have a little bit more leeway. But for those of us that still work and have to plan, this trip was great.
Yeah.
I mean, short and sweet, to the point. I mean, we made a great impact, I think. But more than us making a great impact, I think that we got a bigger impact from them. I mean, at least I did. I mean, it was really nice, especially the night of singing, to be invited into Chris's home. And, I guess I was thinking that, okay, what's this younger guy going to think when all these old people walk in? But there was nothing. There was nothing bad about the whole situation. I mean, it was just like we were accepted. Mm-hmm. He treated us very well. Yeah. I mean, I think that everyone that's there were so inviting. They were so open, and for God's hand that he just reached down and just touched everybody in every situation. Yeah. But just the openness of everything was really a blessing.
Yeah.
But this is such an easy trip to go on. I mean, like 5-6 days at the most. I mean, over a weekend, it's a quick 6-hour drive. And, it was great to drive. I mean, Ted fell asleep all the time, but, it was great. But that's not a bad thing. But it was great. It was quick. It was easy. There was no burdens at all. I mean, for me, I didn't feel any burdens whatsoever. Yeah. And it felt really good to get back out into the mission field like this and feel God's power.
Yeah, absolutely.
His power everywhere.
That's great.
One of the things Zany pointed out earlier, and I've had the opportunity to do international missions, went to England this year and that. There's a need everywhere. Jerusalem, Samaria. Yep. We need to make sure we hit all of them.
Absolutely.
Because God doesn't just say to go here in Lebanon. Mm-hmm. He doesn't say go to Greenville. He says to go, I believe it's to the end of the earth.
That's what he said.
And everybody, you can argue with me, is called to go. Mm-hmm. It isn't the Zanies. It isn't the Dwights. Everyone in this church, this trip, anybody can make. And God doesn't ask us. He doesn't say, hey, Ted, if you're not busy next weekend, can you go on this trip?
Yeah.
God commands us to go tell others. Now, we have opportunities right here in Lebanon. If that's your mission field, God bless you on that. Yep. But I truly believe you are missing one of the biggest blessings in your life if you don't go on or serve God on a mission trip somewhere or do something. That's just my heart. Yeah. I have never gone on a mission trip and came back and said, that was a waste of time. Yeah. How was that waterfalls we seen? Right. No. Every time I come back, everybody who ever goes on that trip will say, it changed my life. It did some point to it.
Yeah. I think one of the tools that Satan uses for people who've never been on a mission trip is starts planting all of these, you're going to run into this. You're not going to be able to handle that. What if this? What if that? To the point that, I can't go. Yep. But this particular trip, or this type trip, it may be Greenville, it may be some other place, you're going to a place where people, number one, are eager for you to be there. Yep. They welcome you lovingly. They have already been praying for you. Mm. And, of course, you're praying along, too, but there may be some fear and trepidation in that. But they are just lifting you up before Him. So the way has been opened up. And then when you get in a, quote, situation that you might have dreaded or feared, it is on the first trip, we were in downtown Greenville doing our prayer walking, and encountered a guy. In fact, he actually approached me, and I think was asking for some money or something. And how do you deal with that kind of situation? But God just gave the words at the moment.
Yep.
And he just took care of the entire situation. And it's incredibly encouraging and powerful to see God work in ways. So for somebody who's never been on a trip, you don't have to have a passport. You don't have to, you're flying and so forth and so on. It's just a real quick trip. As Greg said, it's an easy trip. You're among people that even in South Carolina, they speak essentially maybe a slight different twang, but the same. They eat the same kind of food. So there's really no excuse to not go on this kind of a trip, because it's made for the first time mission trip.
Yeah, that's great.
I mean, the best part about the trip, as far as travel, is not having to go to the airport. I mean, it's like, you get in the car and you go and you make a stop on the way, eat a nice lunch, and you're good to go.
Yeah, absolutely.
You get to stop at Buc-ee's probably too.
The specifics on that is that we left on Thursday, came back on Monday, and it was a $250 trip. I mean, that's just pretty simple for what we got to do. We talked about the camaraderie that happens. I've loved the networking that happened there at Redeemer City, where we served, but also we've seen it as we came back. Dwight and I were part of the Good News Club that Immanuel does at Carroll Oakland. So Sue was as well, Greg's wife. And so that first year, we all came back from the trip, and Ted joined the Good News Club. And so the second time we went, Sue went to the mission trip. Yeah. And now this year we also have Eddie, who went on the mission trip, that's now serving in Good News Club. Yep. So there's that kind of camaraderie, the friendship that built out of that we brought back home with us to begin to serve here locally as well. So, it's just, you just can't outgive God.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. And mission trips are so important because, like you said, the Great Commission, like we as believers are called to go and make disciples of all nations. That's the last thing Jesus told us before he left the earth. So how important is that if that's what he's telling us to do?
Let me remind you what to do here.
Right.
Okay.
So it's incredibly important, but also if we just go on the trip and do the thing on the trip and then come back and, all right, that was good, leave that there, and then I'm just going to go about my life, I think we've also missed the point, because we're called to make disciples here as well. Mm-hmm. So often going on a trip prayerfully affects our life here as well. So I want to get back to that in a minute and how it's affected y'all's lives. But before we get there, I want to see, are there any other, you mentioned the funny stories. Are there any other funny stories that happen on the trip? You can pick on each other.
Absolutely.
Maybe don't pick on the ones who aren't here unless it's your wife. You can.
No, it's always, just pick on 10 days.
So one of the opportunities we had was on Sunday mornings that they were having church, and so they needed people to work out in the parking lot.
Yeah.
And yes, I got to pick to wear the yellow vest to be I was the Barney Fife directing
traffic. And I'm still bitter about that.
Dwight got mad, threw a temper tantrum, but we're not going to go there. But it was so funny, and so the thing was, it was freezing. I wish I wouldn't have done it. It was like 30 degrees and snowing out, and I'm in this little yellow vest out there going, okay, I love this. I love this. I ain't letting Dwight do it.
It's for the Lord.
It's for the Lord. Come on in, get in here.
Yeah, we watched him from the window.
I looked over there.
You go, Ted, you go.
Yeah, I was at the front door, and I could see Ted the whole time. Uh-huh. And as I'm opening the door and that wind is rushing through, oh man, it's cold out there. And I'd step back in And I'm thinking, poor Ted. I'm glad he was the tough one that took that
I wish
job.
I had a hat. That bald head was cold.
That's true. I was thinking. In fact, I was saying, "Somebody got a hat to give him?"
Yeah. So you were bitter until you weren't. In other
That's
words.
right.
Has to be careful what we ask for. You know?
The
That's
people
good.
there, because I've been there twice, they were so fun.
Yeah.
You know, it wasn't. It's like going to visit people you've known forever,
Yeah.
and they were all laughing. We were all having a good time about it. So it was just fun.
Yeah. That's great.
Yep.
That's great.
This is not the whole thing is kind of a funny story in that fact that we love to go to Jared and his wife Katie's home, a lovely home, and they have 4 children that are delightful. And so and this is true, one of the things that happened, that a lot of the families had family that moved there with them to be a part of this church plant. And so Katie's sister moved there, which has been huge in her being able to do the work of the church and have childcare.
Yeah.
You know how important that is, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely.
And so that was huge for them, but we were able to go back and see them, and Caroline, whose house that we helped paint the first time, joined us for a while. But as we talked about things, and I had, being older, we're mostly older, and sometimes I think it's nice to have some new young life in there. And but one of the things that was special to me, because I wondered, how much are we really helping them? And what Katie said was, she said, oh gosh, we have lots of mission trips that come and help us as a new church plant. But we are saying, well, when is Immanuel coming? Who's this coming? Well, so when's Immanuel coming? And so I said, well, why is that? And she said, you come and you serve. You're able to encourage. We don't have to entertain. We don't have to. So you just come in and are kind of a part. Yeah. And that was special to me to hear that we really were making a difference. Again, for that families, those families that are working and doing all that work as a new church plant, even though God's blessed, there's still, because he's blessed so much, there's a whole lot more for those pastors to do as far as ministering to those families and in that church plant. And so, again, it was fun to hear that from me. That
one of the
That's
things,
awesome.
as the chairman of the missions, we're looking into 25 mission trips.
Yeah.
And we're at a point where maybe we're going to.
What is that? 25 different mission trips or mission trips?
25. Great point.
It's like, man,
we're going back every month, twice a month until we get it right. We're going to keep going. By golly, start signing up. But so we called Pastor Philip down there and said, "Hey, do you want us to come?" He's like, "You all got to come. We want you to come back. We just, like Zany was saying, we love when you all come."
Yeah.
And so we will be going back in 2025. Not sure of the date yet.
Yeah.
But we're going to work that out in the next couple weeks. But highly encourage people to go.
That's great.
One of the things, if you like to eat, if anybody knows me very well, I probably like to eat a little bit.
Yeah.
There's a point on this trip I'm like, okay, I can't eat any. Please stop.
Wow.
Yeah, it was like,
That's right.
Yeah, but it's as when you're eating, that is such a time of gathering and talking and you laugh and you do all the. So meals are, as you know, are always fun, and it was just a good time. I think we all ate so much on the way down there.
Well, speaking of eating, that triggered a thought. One of the responsibilities as leader of the team was to secure housing.
Yeah.
And there are, my goodness, something like 30 missions houses or something in the greater Greenville area.
Wow.
It was unbelievable. But where we stayed on the first trip, the men stayed in one house, the women in another, because we had a larger team. One of those houses, we were able to make it work with the size team we had. And seemed like about 2 weeks before our trip, the church contacted me and said, we've had a missionary with an emergency. They've got to come home, so we can't let you have the house.
Yeah.
They're a priority. I said, absolutely, of course. Well, that leaves us without housing. And I began making some calls and contacted a church, and they said, we'd be glad to have you. It was maybe a little further out than what we'd originally planned, but it was an easy drive because Greg was doing it. But when we got to this house, it's a small, relatively small country church, but they had this house. They had food for us. They had snacks for us, and would not take a penny for our being there. Was just such a blessing. You can't outgive God.
Yeah.
And just such a blessing to connect with that church and see how they were doing missions. They were part of our mission trip by just helping us out.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's great. I have a feeling, Ted mentioned the food. I have a feeling that's going to be, again, this is the first one we're recording, but I have a feeling that's going to be a common theme with the trips because food tends to be a big part of
It
even.
does.
I bet our food was better than your food.
Yeah. Was y'all's mostly home cooked type stuff, or was it going out places?
That was going out. But
Yeah.
it's country cooking kind
Yeah.
of stuff, you know.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, we were in New York, so we hit about every nationality. I think while we were there, we got a little bit of everything. But one of the great things along with that, if anyone hasn't been on a trip, part of the going on a trip process is raising support for the trip, which can be daunting, but God takes care of that every single time without question. But with the raising support, once you're there, part of the trip budget is food. And so that's the great thing is once you get there, excuse me, once you get there, you're not worried about, well, now I got to pay for this trip or this meal and this meal. Like it's all part of the support that you raised, and then you just get to go enjoy that as a team and take care of it. So that's a great part of the trip too. Yeah, this is great. What there's been a lot of good stories, but on mission trips, it's not all positive at times. So what were some of the hardships or hardest things, the most difficult parts of this trip?
I'll go with that. And you're right. It's not all, there's some tough parts or it wouldn't happen.
Yeah.
I'll be honest, though. The hardest part for me was I have been on 2 of these.
Yeah.
Pastor Jared, his family, all those have really become friends. And when the last night we had a meal together and we all hugged and we kind of said goodbye and all that,
Yeah.
walking out of there and thinking maybe in my head, I may never see the people, if we don't come, I'll never see them again. And you start wondering, are they going to be okay?
Yeah.
What? And it's a little tough to walk. It's like saying to a cousin, maybe you're going to visit or a friend.
Yeah.
Well, it's goodbye, but I'll never see you again, But, it's funny. God works it out. We're going back. And
Yeah.
But it's hard to leave a friend.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's great. Any other challenges along the way while you were there? Or?
As the leader of the team and my personality, you want to do it all right.
Yeah.
And when you've got a door that you have to lock inside and outside with the key, and you unlock the door in the morning and you leave the key in it and you're waiting for people to get out, and you turn around and pull the door shut and you think, I just locked the key in the house. So the pastor of that church was on vacation. They were in Florida. It was break for them. So I had to call him. He had to turn around and call somebody at the church and come by and get in the church to get the other key to unlock it and put it under the mat for us. So it's a little embarrassing.
Yeah.
But
For free housing, too.
for free housing,
right.
yeah.
Surprised one of y'all didn't share that as a funny story.
So, I had forgotten it.
We don't want to make fun of Dwight.
I had forgotten it. I'd say that Dwight said that I do the trim when we paint, and I was doing the trim up high, and so for this old woman climbing that little ladder up and down multiple times was the only hard thing. It really, as far as being difficult. If we got tired, we could sit and rest. It wasn't, it's not like you're trying to keep up on a long trip. And as we walked, if you got tired and you wanted to rest, you could. And so it was just a delightful trip, and don't miss the blessing.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great. Any other challenge?
I really can't think of any challenges other than like Zany just said. I was up and down the ladder quite a bit painting, and I really didn't feel it till we got home.
Yeah.
And then I was like, oh wow, but the whole trip was a blessing. I mean, there really wasn't a hardship there really wasn't a hardship that I can think of.
Yeah.
Any hardships that you do experience, and they were minimal at best, but when you walk into the church and you see people from the previous trip and their face lights up when they see you and they come and run and give you a hug, man, I tell you, that's special stuff.
Absolutely.
And while we were working on that Sunday, being like, poor Ted out there in the cold, I was in the sanctuary greeting people as they came in, and it was you get folks that have been coming there, but you're a face they've never seen. Yep. So the question was like, well, what are you doing here? And told them what we were kind of doing, and to see them perk up, and it's like, oh wow, that's great. Thank you for coming, and got to talk to a lot of people that morning, both services, and they were all just very, very welcoming.
Yeah,
so
that's awesome.
I think that if there were any hardships, the blessings that we did have far overshadowed any minute things that could have happened.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I mean, it was a blessed trip.
Yeah, that's awesome.
It was great.
And I'm assuming the what are you doing here is probably, were you guys serving or doing something when you were asked that?
Yeah. So
Usually, yeah.
My goal was, greeting people as they were coming in. And I knew everybody would have their own seat because everybody has their own seat. And so it was more of just, they would come up to me more than I would go to them because, hey, there's a new face. What's going on? And I thought that's really cool because being new in a church is probably one of the hardest things out there. Just because, why are we here? Why is this person here? What's their story? And for them to come up and talk to us first or talk to me first, it was so easy to talk back. And I guess sometimes for me, it's like when I start talking, I don't stop, and I have to be punched to stop talking like that. But it was that really nice response to be able to just converse back and forth with somebody you've never met before, and like Ted said, maybe somebody you'll never see again, but they're always going to be in the back of your mind, and God's going to keep them there.
Yeah.
One of the things they do down there, and they stress, is that the minute you get out of your car there, they want somebody to welcome. They want you to feel welcome and wanted at that church. The minute you get out of your car to when you leave, they are very, very, what word do I want to use? Make that a point to make sure you feel, everybody feels welcome. And they have such a diverse group of people who come there. And it's just not all young people. You have old, young, every nationality. Yeah. Redeemer City is doing one of the best jobs I ever seen, doing everything they possibly can to reach that community. Yeah. They'll hand out goodie bags at Women's Center. They will go and do this and that. They're on fire. Yeah. They are on fire for Greenville, and their goal, I think, is to win every person there to God. Jesus, it's just awesome. Amazing.
Yeah, if there's anybody listening who's never been to a church plant, y'all know this. Just being at a church plant, and that was the reason I asked that. The huge difference in a church plant versus a church like Immanuel is they're so. And it's a lot easier with a smaller congregation, but they are so welcoming typically because they pretty much know everyone in the church. And I don't know what the size at this point of Redeemer City is, but But typically, especially early years, like, everybody in the church, you want them to feel a part of that family. So the welcoming side of that and being genuinely interested in who they are and their story and bringing them along in this journey with you is huge. It can be challenging to go to a church plant and then come back to a church like Immanuel and try to figure out how to fix everything. And not that Immanuel is in a terrible spot by any means, but it is just a lot more challenging to be very welcoming and to catch every new person that comes in when you've got 1,100 people on campus every week. And so that's where small groups plays a huge part, and discipleship groups and Sunday school classes. So, but I think from a personal level, for me, I know it can be very impactful to go to a church plant to see just that welcoming atmosphere and catching new first-time guests and being genuinely interested and welcoming for them, and then that impacting you and how you bring it back. So yeah, we talked a little bit about that earlier. What are some ways that this trip as a whole, for some of you on a second time level, but also for a first time going on this trip, what are some ways that it's impacted your life, your ministry, your attitude, whatever it may be, since you've been back? How has it been impactful, not just as this week, that was great, and I can look back on that, but how has it impacted the way you live your life today?
Well, I mentioned the prayer walk that had meant so much to me that I felt like I was seeing God use that, bringing people in. The people that, as you prayer walked and talked, they would talk about they knew something about it. But to be sure and take advantage of the opportunities we have here to prayer walk, don't let that be a blessing there and not come back here and take advantage of that. When we prayer walked at Castle Heights and that was with all the schools that were happening. We just happened through Go Wilson. Immanuel partnered with Castle Heights Elementary, and and even for myself, it didn't have to be an organized thing for me to be praying for my community. I'm not walking around it that much, but I can be driving around it and be praying for my community. As Wilson is growing, Lebanon is growing, and so we want to be making a difference in those lives as God brings them to us. You can do missions that way because these people won't be here forever. Most of them will be going somewhere else eventually. We don't have the same job all of our life or live in the same place all of our life like we did once upon a time. And so the mission field is open as we minister to people that God will carry elsewhere in their lives. So,
absolutely. It's good.
One of the things I would say is going on a trip like this, you're focused during the trip, and it's real easy to come back and lose that focus on evangelism or just praying or being aware of the burdens and struggles that the staff goes through. So that heightened awareness when you come back, when you see something here, it's a real quick trigger to remind you to pray about this, to how can I minister in this situation or that situation. So it just kind of sharpens who you are as a believer.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great.
For me, working every day in the public and working with different employees in our company, coming back, it gives you that sense of okay, I just spent this time in this place. And we prayer walked and we talked with people, and it was God all the time. And coming back, hearing people talk at work and being able to interject little things and steer conversations a certain way without so-called, in quotes, breaking policy or procedure within a company, it helps to give you that sense of, hey, I can talk about this and I can talk about it this way, and I can steer this conversation any way I want to. And it was really, it was amazing that it was really easy to do that. And I could steer conversations, towards God and towards what Christ has done in my life. And it just made it a lot simpler to talk to people here, because I know, like, going on international trips, like when we went to Peru, when I went with Ted, and then I went with my wife Sue, it was easy to talk to people there because it was away from here, where we get that thing where, like Dwight said earlier, it's, you know, like, what are we going to get from people? Or we're worried that people are going to, you know, say this and say that and come at us and be combative.
Yeah.
And coming back from this trip just gave me that sense of, I can do this, and I can do this more, and it's easier now to bring that conversation around and to hopefully put a glint in somebody's eye of looking at Christ in a different sense of how they have been.
Yep.
And not pushing them, but guiding them to that light.
Yeah.
And it just made it a little bit simpler.
Absolutely. That's great.
I'm going to piggyback off that a little bit.
Yeah.
So I shared this with the men of Byron last month, and I hope I can get this across correctly. So probably the most important thing there is in anyone's life is sharing Christ. If anybody's ever had a family member or a friend that doesn't know Jesus, and as you get older and say you have a son or a daughter or a mother or a father that don't know Christ, the hardest thing in the world to do is try to share Christ with somebody that you know, that knows you, that knows who you were before you were a thing. But it's a lot easier if Zany Moss or Dwight Moss is sitting on a park next to someone and say, hey, you know, tell me your story, and here's my, so I have a son who's 45 years old. He doesn't know Christ. He doesn't want to hear it from his dad.
Right.
That grew up probably not living the life of Christ. But I guarantee you, if he runs into Greg, who he's not threatened by, that he doesn't know, that Greg can say, hey, let me tell you about my Jesus, he has more of an impact there than he has. So when we're on mission, and we're sitting in that park bench, and we're talking to that guy that maybe needs a buck for something or something like that, that's somebody's Ted Wolfer's son.
Amen.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So
right.
you're going to do kingdom work that you'll never know the difference in.
Yeah.
But you're making an impact. I can try, I pray, but you're going to make an impact. So that little word, like Greg said, talking to that, having the boldness to say, hey, can I tell you about Jesus?
Yeah.
Or, hey, can I show you some love? You're going to make a difference that you have no idea you've ever made.
Yeah.
So that one word of kindness, that one act of fellowship is going to impact some old man sitting in Lebanon, Tennessee's life forever.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's so good. And yeah, I think, you know, the impact that we make there is incredible because there could be people in Greenville or in New York or in England that are in that same boat, and you have that one conversation that just put them over the edge to actually act on it. Yeah. So the impact is huge. But Dwight mentioned when you were painting the walls, you didn't get to finish one of them, and how frustrating that can be to not finish the work. You always want to do more. And I feel like that's going to be another common theme of these trips, that you get to the end of the trip and it's like, man, I feel like we just got started. There's so much more we want to do. Yeah. But the beauty in that is it doesn't have to just stop on the trip. These short-term trips should create long-term impact. And so it should be the way that we live our lives. It should be the way that we do life here in Wilson County. And unfortunately, we've convinced ourselves that our work life is separate than our church life, and our church life is separate than our mission life, but they're all our life. We've been called to be Christians, and then as Christians, we've been called to go and make disciples. And so it should impact everything that we do. So, yeah, I love all of that. What are some ways to kind of wrap us up? What are maybe some prayers that were answered there, but some ways that we could be praying for our partners or these churches over the next year till our next trip, or just in the meantime?
Well, one of the fun things for me, you know, we talked about we can see them on Facebook or Instagram or something, and they have just started their own Good News Club there.
Oh, really?
With the school right next to them. And so it was a place that they wanted to minister and make a difference, and so that's one of the things that are happening. And so I know to be able to make that happen and have the workers there, that we can pray for that, for them, for their Good News Club,
That's
as
awesome.
well as the Good News Club that Immanuel
Yeah.
is sponsoring. And for when you get involved in church and you see God moving, it encourages you to do more.
Mm-hmm.
But these pastors have large families. Most of them all had, 4 children or 2 children. They were so that they not forget family. That's a big thing, that while they're ministering, that they still put the priority in their marriage and on their family is a big prayer request that I have for them as well. So that they have the strength and the stamina to do all that is required in that church plant, but also for those things are kind of things that I think about for them.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, that's the thing. Certainly, family. They're in a church plant. There's just a lot of things going constantly. It is here too.
Yeah.
But you have a smaller staff, and there's more responsibility on individual people, and it never ends. And it's very easy to neglect family if you're not careful.
Yep.
And just the reminder that they have issues staff-wise. I mean, just they have problems. They have the same kind of things that every church staff deals with, but they also have that family component, and they may not have, I think they probably do at Redeemer City, but I don't know. But they may not have the close connection support. So I'm remembering to pray for them continually, which is also a reminder to pray for our church staff.
That's right.
As well.
Yeah, absolutely. It's good.
One of the things I think, this is a very fast-growing church. A lot of new people coming in.
Yep.
They're doing a lot of great things. Who doesn't like that?
Yeah.
Satan doesn't like that. So they need to make sure, and I pray about that, Satan doesn't come in and start a different gospel
That's right.
in Sunday school. Doesn't, he would love to get in and cause chaos between the staff
Absolutely.
and things like that,
Yep.
because obviously they're doing great kingdom work down there,
Yep.
and he doesn't want it.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of things that could happen, and Satan would like to stop what they're doing.
For sure.
And with the new people that are coming in, these are people that are new Christians or haven't been in church, and they're really, their emphasis are people that have been hurt in church or whatever, and they come back. But these are people that are thinking, because they've come to church, that's all there is to do. And so that leaves all the work for the staff, for few. I mean, that happens in most churches, but it's even more exaggerated in a church plant.
Yeah.
So that's
Absolutely.
part of the stamina that I
Yeah.
pray for the staff.
For sure. Yeah.
I mean, I guess, as far as, like I said, coming back, I mean, prayer is definitely increased. But I think I continually pray for them, but I've also been praying for us in this church to have people think about, what can I do to help?
Yeah.
And again, going back, I know it sounds, repetitive and all that, but this trip is just so easy. So praying for folks just to come to that understanding of this is something easy that I can do. And for first-time folks especially, because I know I remember when the first time I went on a trip was to Peru, and it was Ted's fault. I did not think that there was anything that I could offer at that time. I thought that there's nothing I can do.
Yeah.
I'm not. I would, if I went, I'd be in the way. And between Ted and Gary Maggart, they gave me scripture and they gave me guidance. And for anybody that has never gone on a trip, just remember that God is there before we get there.
Yeah.
He's gonna lead the way. Christ is already there, and it's the simplest thing to do. So just I continue to pray for everybody here to give them that heart, and if they've never been on a trip, this is the trip to go on.
Yep.
Because it's painless.
Yeah.
Amen.
Yeah, that's awesome.
My prayer also is this. A lot of times this happens. This becomes a certain group's mission trip. Mm-hmm. This is Dwight's trip. Oh, that's the trip Ted Wolfer always. This isn't Ted's trip. It ain't Dwight's trip. It's the church's trip. Right. And we need to call different people to go on this trip. Mm-hmm. Not this. It isn't 20% of the church or 10% of the church to do missions. Yep. It is. You will be blessed. Yep. It's an easy trip. It's a simple trip. You'll be blessed more than you ever think. Anybody can do it. Yeah. And I know people will hear, oh, I can't do it. I can't. Step out on faith. Trust your Lord and God, and you'll be good.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, I think sometimes we look at things totally differently when it's a mission trip. If you can ride 6 hours to Florida or Kansas or wherever, you can ride 6 hours to Greenville. If you can paint at your house and do a little trim work, you can do it there. Yeah. If you can walk around in your neighborhood just thinking of needs and be praying for neighbors and friends, you can do that in Greenville. Yeah. So the things that we do here easily transfer to a mission trip like this, for certain.
Yeah, that's awesome.
There's no way you can bless a parent any better than loving on their kids. Mm. And I think about that being, as we travel to other places, we're loving on God's kids.
That's right.
And a sweet way to bless God and to love him back.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's great. Well, thank you guys. Thanks for coming today, but also thank you all and the others on the team that weren't able to make it today for taking time out of your weeks, out of your busy schedules. We've all got stuff going on, taking time off work. I know some of you are retired, but taking time just out of your schedule, away from your families to go and to do what God's called us to do. It's not taken lightly, and like y'all are talking about, speak that to yourself too. Yes. That this is what you've been called to do, and you guys are stepping into that. So thank you for doing that, and thank you for sharing. I loved hearing some of these stories that I haven't heard. Some of the things you were able to do. I hope it was somewhat therapeutic. This is a little bit further after the trip than we will hopefully in the future plan to do these recordings. But thank you for sharing those, and hopefully it was somewhat therapeutic to think back on some things and to recall things to memory. I love seeing the sparks go off of like, oh yeah, I forgot that happened. So it's really cool. Love hearing the stories and what all God did. And yeah, we'll continue to pray for this church, pray for the partners there and the ministry that's happening. Pray for Satan to protect as he plans to, not for Satan to protect, for God to protect when Satan wants to attack.
Good idea. There you go. Good idea.
Whoa, wrong direction. But yeah, thank you guys for taking time. And for those who are thinking about going on a trip, like they said, this is a great first trip. It's an easy trip. And this, I think just the nature of, like you said, we went in October, then it was a quick turnaround to go in March. We had launched the trips, and then it was kind of hard to get people together. So it was a little bit of a smaller trip this year. But this is also one that really any generation can go on too.
Oh, yeah,
There's,
by far. Yeah.
I mean, and last year I think was a little bit wider spread. Maybe schedules had something to do with that, or who knows. But it's one of those, every generation matters and should be involved in missions. Right. So,
absolutely.
Well, thank you guys for,
One thing before we go, just remember in November, it's GOvember.
Yep.
And I think it's the third Wednesday of this month. We will have introduction to all our trips for next year on that Wednesday night. Encourage everybody to come out and just hear what we're going to do in 2025, not 25 mission
25 trips.
Yeah, but just come out and see what's available and just let God speak to your heart.
Yeah. That's great. Thanks, Ted. Well, thank you guys for being a part of it, and thank you for going on a trip.